What's up, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube? I'm Never a Dull Moment, and this is the Rebel Restoration Part 2. I know this lagged a little bit behind the first video, but I'm kind of making this in real time, so it's just taken me a little bit longer than expected to get to the point where I'm at. So I'm switching up the format a little bit for this video. I think this will end up looking and sounding better, as well as making it easier on me in terms of actually recording stuff. Let me know what you think, but I think I like this format a bit better. If you haven't watched part 1 of this series, I recommend that you go and check that out first. In that video, I got the bike mechanically up and running, and in this video, we're pretty much just going to get it to look a little bit nicer and try and increase the resale value a bit. Now, anytime that you want something to look better, the quick and easy thing to do is just to give it a wash, and that did make things look a little bit better. Of course, the problem with washing things is that you also find out what's not just going to come off with a hose and a little bit of soap. And for me, what I saw was that the exhaust was pretty rusted in the front portion of the bike. A lot of people like to start out with a chemical rust remover. So that's what I did. I sprayed down the front of the exhaust where it was kind of most apparent, and I let that sit for a little while as the instructions stated. Gave it a scrub down with some brushes, and it removed a little bit of rust. So I went for another coat after completely washing that off. Still looked a little bit better, but I started to learn that probably the chemical was not going to be the only thing I needed. After that, I started using some aluminum foil and going over and polishing out the chrome. And that really resulted in bringing out a nice shine. So I was pretty happy with how the exhaust was looking at that point, and I started to move to other areas of the bike. Somewhere along the way, I was trying to polish the top case on the engine, and I removed one of the ignition coils. And after I was kind of done there, it appears that the ignition coil broke in some way. Nothing snapped or anything like that, but it just wouldn't go back onto the spark plug. So I ended up having to order a new part. The other major thing that I wanted to tackle with this bike was swapping out the gas tank. The one that came with the bike was just kind of rusted out and the paint was damaged. It had 2 dents on either side. And I just don't think that the bike would look that good unless I actually tackled that problem. So at this point, I was waiting on 2 parts, and without the ignition coil, I couldn't even use the bike to ride around. So I just kind of went really ham with getting all of the chrome really polished up. I went over all of it with aluminum foil, and I just kind of went slow and took my time in every little area, and that brought out some really nice results. After that, I went over with some metal polishing pads that I bought and kind of finished it off. Got everything polished up there, went over with a microfiber. I was really impressed with how much the time and effort went into it. Really showed a huge difference. So I was really happy with how that ended up looking. Now, eventually my ignition coil did come in, but there was a small problem. The eBay page that I purchased from showed very clearly a very stock, standard looking Honda ignition coil, but what they ended up sending me looked like this. I'm not really sure why this happened. I reached out to the seller and they said they were sold out of the original part that I was buying, so they sent me the racing one. And that kind of stuff never happens on eBay when you're buying parts. You always get exactly what you're looking for. Yeah, it's an unfortunate reality. When you're buying a lot of parts, especially for old bikes, things can get mixed around, sellers can be a little bit dishonest, and it's kind of annoying. Fortunately, I was able to rig up a solution that worked for me. I was able to use the good part of the ignition coil that came with the bike and attach that to the part that had broke from the new part, and I kind of swapped around some parts. And it doesn't look totally stock, but I think it's a lot better than what I started with. So with that up and running, the bike was now cleaned, polished, the exhaust looked a lot better, and the bike would actually run again because it had a new ignition coil. Now the gas tank ended up taking a bit longer than I expected to come in. Finally arrived, and I commenced the process of draining the old gas tank out, getting the parts swapped over, and getting that actually fitted onto the bike. A little inside secret is that the gas tank I got, the style, is actually for the earlier generation of the Honda Rebels. I'm not sure exactly the years, but I did have an 85 previously, and it had this same kind of gas tank design. I was not sure if this was going to look good, but when I actually put it on the bike, I was really happy with how it looked. It kind of looks a little bit more classic and vintage than the original tank, and I was really happy with that look. So, just to refresh your memory a little bit, this is the bike that I started with. It was in a little bit rough shape. Now, functionally, the engine worked fine. The transmission worked, but the shifter was totally bent. A lot of the metals were kind of worn and a little bit rusted. The gas tank was definitely beat up and needed attention. The front tire was totally done, the front brake was totally done, and that's what we started with, and here's what we ended up with. This whole project ended up taking me about a month, mostly in waiting for parts to come in and that sort of thing. And honestly, I'm really happy with how everything turned out. This is kind of my first time where I really tried to put a lot of attention into getting a bike looking as clean as I could, and I'm pretty happy with how everything turned out. This is definitely something I'd love to do again in the future. I do plan on continuing some more videos for this series. I'm sure some of you are curious how much this whole thing has costed, and believe me, I have another video planned that I will be addressing all those things in. And on top of that, I may have purchased another bike. Yeah, so there might be even more motorcycle content coming. Stay tuned. If you like this series and what I'm doing here, please give the channel a subscribe. I'm Never a Dull Moment, and I will see you guys soon with some kind of bike content.